Some stories don't begin with fireworks, just a warm roll, a nod, and a quiet bench. But sometimes those quiet things speak the loudest. Every morning, before most alarms rang, the scent of baking bread filled a dusty street in Santa Isabel, New Mexico. It came from Rosie's Bakery, nestled between a pawn shop and a shut-down gas station. The smell of butter and dough told the town a new day had begun. Marisol Rivera, 35, had never left this town for more than a weekend. Each morning, long before sunrise, she was already rolling dough, shaping bagels, and sliding honey muffins into the oven. She wasn't loud, didn't linger after work, but she remembered small things, like who wanted extra sugar or who just needed their coffee without small talk. And she noticed him, an older man with gray hair under a battered cap. His coat was dusty and frayed, and he always sat alone on the same bench near the recycling bins, every day, at exactly 6:10 a.m., quiet, still, watching the world pass, but never part of it. At first, Marisol thought maybe he was waiting for someone, but after 5 days, 10, then 3 weeks, it was always the same. He never left the bench without a pause, never spoke, never begged, just gave a tiny nod when she swept the patio in the morning. That was all. Then one cold Tuesday morning, frost still on the windows, Marisol stepped outside with a small brown bag. Inside, a leftover ham sandwich, a banana muffin, and coffee in a cup with a lid. She placed it beside him and mumbled to herself, "Guess we overbaked today." He didn't speak, just looked at the bag, then at her. Not desperate, not angry, just watchful, as if trying to decide whether to trust the moment. Then came the tiniest nod, a little deeper than usual. The next morning he was back. So was the bag. It became their quiet ritual. No hello, no thank you, just the bag, the coffee, and the nod. Marisol never told anyone, not even sure why she did it. Maybe it was something her father once said about the war, about kids picking up crumbs behind soldiers. Or maybe it was her own past, being that hungry child herself after her mother died. Or maybe it was simpler. He was hungry. She could. Bakos people notice everything, especially when you're kind for no reason. Sometimes it inspires, sometimes it stirs whispers, and sometimes it causes trouble. It didn't take long before others noticed the man outside the bakery. One Wednesday morning, as Marisol arranged bagels on the shelf, she overheard a quiet voice near the coffee stand. "He's back again," a woman said just loud enough to be heard. One of Marisol's co-workers, a younger guy wiping down a booth by the window, smirked. "So what now? Free pastries for anyone who hasn't shaved in a month?" Marisol didn't respond. She kept slicing the warm bread, calm and quiet, each slice placed with care. She didn't want the moment disturbed. A few days later, Mr. Raoul, an old retired school teacher who always ordered a double espresso, glanced out the window. "In my day, people like that wouldn't hang around decent shops," he muttered. And no one was handing out freebies just 'cause someone looked sad. Marisol smiled politely and kept working, dusting flour onto the next tray of rolls. Only Rosa, the lottery ticket vendor from down the street, said something different. She leaned in as she picked up her coffee and whispered, "You've got your mama's heart, you know that?" Marisol paused. Rosa had known her mother, the woman who made soup from scraps and gave it to strangers during winter. Marisol couldn't remember her face too well anymore, but she remembered her hands, always warm, always moving, always smelling of parsley and soap. That same day, the man didn't show up. Still, Marisol packed the bag, still placed it on the bench at 6:10. A gust of wind caught the napkin and carried it across the empty parking lot like a lonely flag. She watched it drift. The next morning, nothing, and the next. On the fourth day, Gustavo, the bakery owner, called her into the back office. The room was small, with worn tiles and the smell of burnt coffee and printer ink. He got straight to the point. "Marisol, I know you mean well, but customers are starting to notice. That man, he's making people uncomfortable." She tightened her grip on her apron. "He's never come inside, never asked for anything, But you give him something. Every day, Gustavo said. This isn't a soup kitchen. She stayed quiet. Not because she didn't have a response, but because if she spoke, she might cry. I pay for the food myself, she finally said. It's leftovers, doesn't come from inventory. Gustavo sighed, rubbing his temples. I'm not telling you to stop. Just don't be so obvious. If you're going to give him food, do it out back or something. Marisol nodded. That night, back in her small apartment, she emptied her tip jar. It wasn't much, but enough. Enough for bread, coffee, and a muffin each morning. She placed a few bills in a plain white envelope and wrote in careful handwriting, "Covers 5 days' breakfast." No one would ask to see it. No one had to. For Marisol, kindness didn't need permission, only intention. Sometimes when the world stops watching, we still show up. Not for praise, not for thanks, but because something inside us refuses to forget. A week passed. The bench outside Rosie's bakery, the one that once held a small brown bag and a hot coffee every morning, now sat empty. Still Marisol packed the breakfast, still stepped outside at 6:10, still placed it gently on the bench. She waited by the window each morning, hoping. But no one came. By Saturday, the desert wind had kicked up strong. It blew the bakery's open sign crooked. Marisol sighed, wrapped up the untouched meal and tucked it into the fridge. She didn't want to eat it. Couldn't throw it out. Couldn't leave it out either. The silence out there felt heavier than ever. 10 days after she'd last seen him, her phone buzzed with a message from Rosa. It included a link like a Facebook post. It was a photo from across the street. It showed the bakery, the bench, and a brown paper bag sitting untouched. The caption stung. Rosie's Bakery now feeding imaginary customers. Guess good PR matters more than common sense. The comments were worse. Marketing. Stunt. Probably tosses the food anyway. Feeding strays just brings more of them. People like this need a reality check. Marisol locked her phone. Didn't read anymore. That night, in her small apartment above the bakery, she pulled out a drawer, the lowest one in her dresser. Inside, she kept a silver tin box, old, scratched, but clean. It held the last things her mother ever owned. She opened it gently and took out a small, worn notebook, leather-bound, edges frayed, pages slightly yellowed, her mother's journal. She turned to a page she'd read many times before. The ink was faded, but the handwriting was steady. Gave half my ration today to a little boy crying outside the fence. Some said it was foolish, that it might be a trap, but his eyes, they looked like mine the day my father didn't come home. No one becomes poorer by sharing bread, but those who forget to share stay hungry in ways they'll never understand. Marisol ran her fingers across the final line, as if touching her mother's voice through the page. She didn't know the man's name, didn't know where he'd gone. Maybe she'd never see him again, but she didn't need to. He had been hungry, and she had bread. Sometimes answers arrive when we've stopped expecting them, not in whispers, but in footsteps, uniforms, and a letter sealed with memory. On the 11th morning, the sky was gray, the kind of rare, chilly morning Santa Isabel only felt a few times a year. Marisol was behind the counter, quietly wiping down the pastry case when the sound of tires crunching gravel made her look up. 4 black military SUVs pulled up, matte, spotless, and perfectly lined up in front of the bakery. Everyone inside froze. Even the espresso machine hissed more quietly. The doors opened all at once. Soldiers stepped out 2 by 2, clean uniforms, silent steps, no words. Just a kind of stillness that filled the air with tension. Then, from the front vehicle, a tall man stepped out. His face was weathered by time and sun. His dark blue uniform was spotless, lined with medals and ribbons. His boots hit the pavement with a steady rhythm. He entered the bakery. The small bell above the door rang louder than usual. "Is there a Marisol Rivera here?" he asked, voice low but firm. Marisol stood behind the counter, hands still damp from cleaning. "Yes," she said, her voice barely more than a breath. The man walked forward, calm, steady. I'm Lieutenant Colonel David Santos, United States Army Special Forces. He reached into his uniform and pulled out a sealed envelope. It was thick, carefully folded and stamped with official markings. This is from Ignacio Torres, he said. The man you gave breakfast to every morning. Marisol blinked. Her hand instinctively rested on the counter, trying to steady herself. The colonel continued. He was the father of Sergeant Mateo Torres, one of my best men. Mateo died in action 2 months ago during an overseas mission. After that, Mr. Torres disappeared. The bakery fell even more silent. He blamed himself, the colonel said. Carried grief heavier than most people. Could understand. He paused, then added, but 3 months ago I got a letter from him, not about his son, not about his pain. It was about you. He raised the envelope. In his final note, written just before he passed away from heart failure, he asked us to find the woman in the red apron. He said, the colonel cleared his throat. His voice thickened slightly. She didn't ask me who I was. She didn't offer pity. She just gave me food. Every morning. Like I mattered. Tell her she helped a broken father believe the world still had kindness in it. Marisol's mouth opened, but no words came. Tears welled in her eyes. She stood frozen, hand pressed against the counter glass. The colonel stepped back, came to full attention, and gave her a formal salute. Outside, every soldier followed suit, standing tall, in silence, saluting the woman behind the counter of a small town. Her tears came quietly, not from sadness, but from the weight of it all. She hadn't rescued anyone, hadn't served in war, hadn't done anything loud or grand. She'd just offered a warm roll, poured coffee, left it without asking why, and somehow that small gesture had traveled across grief, over battlefields, into the final words of a father who once felt invisible. It had become a promise, and now that promise was being kept. Real change doesn't always start with a speech or a crowd. Sometimes it starts with a muffin, a folded napkin, a quiet nod that says, I see you. Within 3 days, the photo of Marisol standing behind the bakery counter, eyes teary, soldiers saluting, had made its way across the town and beyond. The local paper ran the story under the headline, The Morning Ritual That Helped. A father heal. Marisol didn't let the attention change her. She still opened the bakery at 5:30, still wore her red apron, still kneaded dough with the same focus and quiet care. But the town had changed. A young mother came in with her toddler, bought nothing, and left a folded note on the counter. My brother's a Marine. Thank you for remembering that soldiers leave families behind. An older man, quiet and thin, placed a military challenge coin next to the register and nodded. Vietnam, 74. First time I've believed in people again. Others began showing up, not always to buy. Some came just to sit. Some brought small things, a patch, a medal, a prayer written by hand. Veterans, widows, children. Each one carried a story, and somehow, a loaf of bread gave them permission to tell it. Then, one morning, tucked between thank you cards pinned on the wall, Marisol found a letter. The handwriting was shaky, like a child's. Dear Miss Marisol, I'm Lucia, Ignacio's granddaughter. We didn't know he passed away until someone from the base called. But Grandma said he always talked about you, said you gave him food when no one else even saw him. We found a box under his bed. It had every napkin you folded, every note you left. He never threw them away. Thank you for being kind when he needed it most. Love, Lucia. Marisol framed the letter and hung it behind the counter, not where everyone could see, just where she could. A month later, Gustavo arrived early. He held a wooden sign under his arm. He didn't say much, just stepped outside and mounted it below the bakery's logo, then brushed his hands off on his jeans. The sign read, Bread for those who need it. No questions, no shame. One chili. Morning, a teenage girl lingered outside the door, hesitant. Her hands were buried deep in her hoodie. Her eyes carried more than her age. She stepped in quiet. "My dad's deployed," she mumbled. "My mom cries a lot. I just wanted to know if you still have any bread." Marisol smiled softly. "We've always got bread," she said, "and a seat, and coffee, and someone to talk to if you want." She placed a warm roll on the table, then walked away, just like before. That evening, while cleaning the back counter, Marisol noticed something beside the flour bin. Another challenge coin, heavier than the last. She picked it up, turned it over. The inscription read, "Semper Fidelis, never forgotten." She slipped it into her pocket. Didn't ask who left it. Didn't need to. Outside, the sky glowed golden orange, that soft desert amber light only seen for a few minutes each evening. The bakery windows caught the glow like gentle flames. Inside, the ovens hummed. The world was loud, sometimes harsh, but in that little corner of Santa Isabel, a promise kept, not with words but with breakfast, still lived on. Because even in our darkest moments, kindness finds a way, quiet, steady, unshaken. Not everyone who helps wants to be seen. Some just want to make sure someone else isn't hungry today. And sometimes, that alone is enough to change everything.